This is the story of a true house cleaning horror I'm going to tell you. And believe me, it still gives me chills when I think about it. I wasn't prepared for what happened that day. I thought it would be just another cleaning job, dusting, mopping, maybe dealing with a few spiders. But what I walked into was something I will never forget. It all started when I got a call from a woman named Mrs. Alden. Her voice was shaky, like she hadn't slept in days. She told me she needed someone to clean out her late uncle's house. He had passed away a few weeks ago, and she couldn't bring herself to step inside. She offered me double my usual rate, so I said yes without thinking twice. I mean, how bad could it be? The house was located on the edge of town, hidden behind a row of dead trees and covered in ivy, like it had been swallowed by nature itself. When I pulled up in my car, I instantly felt something wrong. I can't explain it. The air felt heavy, like the house didn't want me there. But I brushed it off. I grabbed my cleaning kit and went up to the front door. The key was left under the doormat, just like Mrs. Alden said. I opened the door and immediately a wave of musty air hit my face. It smelled like mold, old wood, and something else. Something rotten. I stepped inside, turned on the flashlight on my phone, and closed the door behind me. The place was a mess. Dust on every surface, cobwebs hanging from the ceiling, and furniture covered with white sheets. But that wasn't what made me uneasy. It was the silence. A thick, uncomfortable silence that made every creak of the floorboards sound like a scream. I started with the living room. I pulled the sheets off the furniture, wiped everything down, and tried to ignore the way the shadow seemed to move just out of the corner of my eye. At one point, I could have sworn I heard footsteps upstairs. I froze, listened hard, but then told myself it was probably the house settling. Old houses make noises, right? When I finally made my way upstairs, that's when things got really weird. There were 4 bedrooms. 3 of them looked normal, well, as normal as they could be in a house like that. But the 4th one, the door was locked. I tried the key, but it didn't fit. I even tried pushing my shoulder against it, but it wouldn't budge. And that's when I noticed something. From the crack under the door, there was light. A soft, flickering light, like candlelight. But I hadn't turned on any lights, and there was no power in the house. I backed away, goosebumps running down my arms. I decided to leave that room alone and continue cleaning the rest of the place. But I kept thinking about that door. Who had lit that candle? Was someone in there? Was someone living in the house? I shook the thought out of my head. I finished the upstairs hallway and made my way back down. That's when I saw something that made my blood run cold. There were footprints. Wet, muddy footprints. But they weren't from me. I looked down at my shoes. They were dry. These prints led from the front door, across the hallway, and disappeared into the basement door. I stood there, heart pounding in my chest. I didn't want to go down there. Every part of my body was screaming at me to run. But I needed the money. I told myself it was probably an animal or something. Maybe water had gotten in from the storm the night before. I opened the basement door. It was pitch dark, even with my flashlight. The stairs creaked loudly as I went down, each step making me more and more nervous. When I reached the bottom, I saw an old workbench, broken shelves, and boxes covered in dust. But then I saw something that made me stop. In the center of the basement was a circle made of salt. Inside the circle, there were burned out candles, bones, small ones like from a bird or a rabbit, and a strange symbol drawn in black ash on the floor. I had no idea what it meant, but it looked evil. Suddenly, I heard the door upstairs slam shut. I ran up the stairs, heart in my throat, and found the door locked. I tried turning the knob, banging on the door, shouting, but nothing. I was trapped. Then I heard it, a whisper. At first I thought it was the wind, but it wasn't. It was a voice. It said my name. Erica. I froze. The voice came from behind me. I slowly turned around, shining my flashlight. Nothing. Just the basement again. But then I saw the salt circle. The ash symbol had changed. It now looked like an eye, and it was bleeding. I know how that sounds, but I swear to you it was bleeding. Thick, black drops slowly forming around it. I lost it. I started crying, screaming, hitting the door. And then, like magic, it opened. I didn't wait. I ran up the stairs, grabbed my stuff, and ran out of that house without looking back. I called Mrs. Alden from the car, my hands shaking. I told her what I saw. You know what she said? I told you not to go in the basement. That was it. Just that. No shock, no fear, just cold words. I never spoke to her again. A week later, I drove by the house and it was gone. Not just empty, gone, like it had never been there. Nothing but an empty lot surrounded by dead trees. I don't know what I saw that day. I don't know who or what was in that locked room or why that circle was in the basement. But I know one thing. That house didn't want to be cleaned, and whatever was inside it, it's still out there. This is the story of a true house cleaning horror I am going to tell you. And it didn't happen to someone I heard about. It happened to me just last year. If you think cleaning houses is a boring job, wait until you hear what happened in that house on Rosewood Lane. It was a quiet Tuesday morning. I had just finished my second cup of coffee when I got a message from a lady named Margaret Holloway. She found my number online and said she needed someone to clean out her mother's old house. She sounded calm, polite, even grateful. She said the house had been empty for 2 years since her mother passed, and she wanted to sell it soon, but couldn't step foot in it herself. She offered good money, too good to turn down. The house was just outside town, in a lonely corner surrounded by overgrown trees. I drove up to it around 11 a.m., and the first thing I noticed was how still everything was. No birds, no wind, just complete silence. The kind of silence that presses down on your ears. The house looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The windows were dark, and ivy had grown all over the walls. Margaret had left the key in the mailbox just like she promised. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. It was freezing. Colder than it should have been for a spring afternoon. I zipped up my jacket and clicked on my small Bluetooth speaker to have some background music while I worked. The house inside was, just like she described, dusty, full of old furniture and covered in cobwebs. It smelled like a mix of mold and old perfume. You know that smell, right? Like time had been trapped inside for too long. I started in the kitchen, scrubbing down the counters and clearing the cabinets. Most of it was harmless junk, rusty pans, expired canned food, but I found something strange in the bottom drawer, a photo album. It had a thick leather cover and was tied shut with a red ribbon. Curious, I untied it and flipped it open. Every page had pictures of a woman, Margaret's mother, I assumed. But what caught my eye was that in every single photo there was something odd in the background. A shadow. It looked like a tall, thin figure just barely out of focus, always standing in the background. At first I thought maybe it was a person, maybe a trick of the light. but the figure was in every single photo. Every one. I closed the album and shoved it back in the drawer. I told myself it was just old photos playing tricks on my eyes. After the kitchen, I moved to the living room. I was wiping down a dusty coffee table when my music suddenly stopped. I walked over to the speaker and checked it. Battery full. Still connected, but the Bluetooth light started blinking like it had lost connection. Then I heard something, a creak upstairs. I froze. Probably the house settling, I said out loud. But deep down I didn't believe it. Still, I picked up my flashlight and started up the staircase. Each step creaked like it hadn't been walked on in years. The hallway upstairs had 3 doors. The first 2 led to dusty bedrooms with nothing unusual. Just old beds, broken dressers, forgotten memories. The third door was different. It had 5 locks on it. All of them were already open. I hesitated, hand on the knob. My heart was beating like crazy. I slowly pushed the door open, and what I saw inside made me take a step back. The room was spotless. Unlike the rest of the house, this room was clean. Fresh sheets on the bed, a lit candle on the dresser, and a mirror on the wall that looked new. I walked in slowly. There were dolls lined up on a shelf, all of them staring in the same direction, the mirror. And written on the mirror, in red lipstick, were the words, "Don't clean this room." I felt a cold gust of air behind me. I turned quickly. No one was there. I should have left. I should have walked out that moment. But I didn't. I was being paid to clean the house, and I figured it was probably just a weird message someone left years ago. So I started dusting the shelves. The moment I picked up one of the dolls, I heard a whisper in my ear. "Stop." I dropped the doll. It landed face down with a loud thud. That's when the mirror cracked. I swear to you, I didn't touch it. I didn't bump it. But right in the center, a crack formed like a spider web. I backed out of the room, heart racing, and slammed the door shut. I didn't bother with the locks. I just wanted to finish and get out. I went back downstairs trying to calm myself. I told myself it was just an old house. Maybe it was messing with my head. But the house had other plans. The front door was wide open. I know I closed it when I came in. I even remember the click of the lock. But now it stood open, like someone, or something, had walked in. I grabbed my bag and went for the door, but it slammed shut before I could reach it. Locked tight. That's when the lights turned on. The whole house lit up. Chandelier, lamps, everything, even though there was no electricity. I hadn't seen a single working bulb when I came in, and then the music started again. But it wasn't coming from my speaker. It was an old song, something like a lullaby playing from upstairs. I turned around, and at the top of the stairs, standing in the hallway, was a woman. She was pale, her eyes wide and dark, her mouth slightly open like she was frozen mid-scream. She didn't move. She just stared. I couldn't breathe. I blinked, and she was gone. I didn't care about my bag anymore. I ran to the back door, praying it would open. It did. I ran out, jumped into my car, and didn't stop driving until I was back in town. I tried calling Margaret, but she never answered. A few days later, I drove past the house again. It was boarded up. A for sale sign was lying face down in the front yard. I later found out from a local that Margaret's mother didn't die peacefully in that house. She was found locked in that upstairs room, the clean one. with no explanation for how she got there or how the door locked from the outside. She had written something on the mirror before she died. No one had ever figured out what happened. But I know one thing now. That house doesn't want to be cleaned. It wants to be left alone. And whatever lives in that spotless room, it's still waiting for the next person who ignores the warning on the mirror. This is the story of a true house cleaning horror I'm going to tell you. It's one of those stories that starts off normal, just a routine job, but turns into something you never expect. If you think cleaning a house is simple, wait until you hear what happened to my friend Emma last summer. Emma works as a professional house cleaner in our town. She's one of those people who loves order and cleanliness, and she's pretty good at it. One day she got a call from a man named Mr. Collins. He told her he needed his late aunt's house cleaned out before it went on the market. The house was old, sitting on the outskirts of the city, and hadn't been touched since his aunt passed away 6 months earlier. Emma didn't know much about the family, but the pay was good, so she agreed. When Emma arrived at the house, the sun was already setting behind thick clouds, casting long shadows over the cracked pavement leading to the front door. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet, and the house looked like it was waiting for something. She unlocked the door with the key Mr. Collins had given her and stepped inside. The air was cold, and a strange smell hit her right away. It was a mix of damp wood, dust, and something faintly metallic like blood but old and dried. The floors creaked as she walked through the empty rooms, each one filled with the heavy silence of neglect. Emma started in the living room, dusting the old furniture and opening windows to let in fresh air. As she worked, she noticed odd things. The clocks in the house were all stopped at the same time, 3:15. Not one of them worked. It gave the place a frozen-in-time feeling. After a few hours, Emma went upstairs to tackle the bedrooms. There were 3 bedrooms, each covered in sheets and filled with old belongings. The first room was full of boxes and photo albums. As she opened one album, she saw pictures of the aunt, a cheerful woman named Agnes, smiling in every photo. But behind her, in some of the pictures, there was a shadowy figure standing just out of focus. Emma shivered and closed the album quickly. In the second bedroom, Emma found a diary on the bedside table. The pages were yellowed and fragile. Curious, she read the last entries. Agnes wrote about feeling watched, about strange noises in the house at night, and about a presence that didn't want her to leave. Emma's skin prickled. It sounded like Agnes was terrified in her final days. When Emma reached the third bedroom, she noticed the door was slightly ajar. As she pushed it open, she saw it was the cleanest room in the house. The bed was made neatly, the floor swept, and there was a small altar in the corner with candles, dried flowers, and strange symbols drawn on the wall in charcoal. Suddenly, the candles flickered and went out, leaving the room in darkness. Emma's heart raced. She switched on her flashlight and saw the symbols glowing faintly, like they were alive. The temperature dropped sharply. She felt a cold breath on the back of her neck and spun around. Nothing was there. That's when she heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps coming from the hallway outside. Emma's hands shook as she grabbed her phone to call Mr. Collins, but there was no signal. She was trapped in the house, with no way to call for help. The footsteps grew closer. Emma backed into the corner, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. The door creaked open wider and a shadow appeared in the doorway. It was a man, tall, pale, with dark eyes that seemed to pierce through the dim light. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Why are you here?" he asked in a voice like a whisper. Emma wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The man stepped forward, and the symbols on the wall glowed brighter, filling the room with an eerie light. Suddenly, Emma remembered the diary. She pulled it out of her bag and held it up like a shield. The man stopped. "You shouldn't have come here," he said. "Agnes tried to protect the house. Now it's your turn." Emma ran from the room, heart pounding, and didn't stop until she was outside, gasping in the cold night air. The house stood silent behind her, the windows dark once more. When she told Mr. Collins what happened, he only nodded sadly. "My family has been cursed for generations," he said. "No one can live in that house. Agnes was trying to keep something trapped inside." Emma never went back, and she warns everyone now. Some houses aren't meant to be cleaned. They hold things that don't want to be disturbed. And that house on Rosewood Lane, it's still waiting. This is the story of a true house cleaning horror I'm about to tell you. It happened to my friend Jake last fall, and I still get chills thinking about it. You might think cleaning houses is a simple, even boring job, but sometimes it can turn into something you never expect. Jake learned that the hard way. Jake was a college student working part-time as a house cleaner. He didn't mind it much, a few hours here and there, some easy cash. One day, he got a call from a real estate agent named Mrs. Williams. She said there was a house on Pine Street that needed to be cleaned from top to bottom before it could be shown to potential buyers. The house had been empty for a while since the last owner, an elderly man named Mr. Hargrove, had passed away. Jake didn't know much about the house, except that it was old and kind of run down. But the pay was good, so he agreed to take the job. Mrs. Williams gave him the key and told him to be careful. She said the neighbors mentioned strange noises and lights sometimes coming from the house at night. Jake laughed it off. "Old houses creak and groan," he told her. "No, big deal." When Jake arrived at the house, the sun was already low in the sky. The air was cool and heavy with the smell of rain. The house stood at the end of a narrow street, surrounded by tall oak trees with leaves that whispered in the wind. It looked abandoned, with peeling paint and a sagging porch. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was dark and musty. Dust covered everything, and the floorboards creaked under his boots. Jake pulled out his phone to use the flashlight, since the electricity wasn't working. As he walked through the rooms, he could hear the faint drip of water somewhere in the distance. Jake started in the living room, sweeping up years of dirt and cobwebs. As he cleaned, he noticed something odd. The furniture seemed arranged oddly, as if someone had been moved things around in a hurry. He found an old newspaper on the coffee table dated 5 years ago. The headline was about a missing woman. Her name was Sarah Collins. Jake felt a chill, but pushed the thought aside. He was here to clean, not solve mysteries. Upstairs, Jake found the bedrooms. The first room had a broken bed and a closet full of old clothes covered in dust. The second room had a cracked mirror on the wall and a dresser with a photo frame. The picture was of a young woman smiling softly, probably Sarah Collins. Then Jake reached the last bedroom. The door was slightly open, and when he pushed it, he found a room unlike the others. It was spotless. The bed was made neatly, the windows were clean, and a small desk sat by the window with a notebook on it. Jake felt uneasy. It was strange for this room to be so well kept when the rest of the house was falling apart. He walked over to the desk and picked up the notebook. It was filled with handwriting, but as Jake read the pages, his blood ran cold. The notebook belonged to Sarah Collins, and it told a terrifying story. Sarah had been living in the house alone before she disappeared. She wrote about strange noises at night, whispers and footsteps when no one else was home. She mentioned seeing shadows moving in the corners of her eyes. She felt watched and trapped, and she was scared. The last entry ended abruptly. "They're coming for me. I don't know how much longer I can hide." Jake put the notebook down and suddenly felt a heavy presence behind him. He spun around, but no one was there. That's when the door slammed shut. Jake rushed to the door and tried to open it, but it was stuck tight. The room grew cold, and he could hear faint breathing, slow, deep, coming from the shadows. His heart pounding, Jake backed away from the door and looked for another way out. There was a small window, but it was too high to reach. Suddenly, the lights flickered on. The room was filled with an eerie glow. Then, from the corner of the room, a figure stepped forward. It was a woman, pale and translucent, with dark eyes and long hair flowing like smoke. She stared at Jake with sorrow and fear. "Help me," she whispered. Please." Jake was frozen in place, unable to speak. The ghostly woman reached out her hand. Suddenly, the room shook, the windows rattled, and a cold wind swept through. Jake managed to break free and dash to the door. With a desperate shove, it gave way, and he ran down the stairs and out into the night. Outside, the house was silent again. Jake didn't stop running until he reached his car. He never went back. Later, Jake found out that Sarah Collins had vanished without a trace 5 years ago. The police never solved the case, and some say her spirit still haunts that house, trapped by something dark and angry. So if you ever get a chance to clean a house like that, the old empty ones with a history, think twice. Some places hold more than dust and dirt. They hold secrets, and sometimes those secrets want to be found. This is the story of a true house cleaning horror I want to tell you. It happened to my friend Lisa last winter, and it still gives her nightmares. You might think cleaning a house is just a simple job, sweeping floors, dusting shelves, but sometimes it's much, much more. What Lisa experienced was something she never expected, and I promise you'll want to listen closely. Lisa was working as a professional house cleaner to pay for her college tuition. She had cleaned hundreds of houses before and never had a problem. One day she received a call from a man named Mr. Parker. He owned an old Victorian house on Maple Street that had been empty for years. The house was going up for sale, and he wanted it cleaned thoroughly so it could look presentable for buyers. Lisa agreed. The pay was good, and she thought it would be a straightforward job. Mr. Parker gave her a key and warned her to be careful, because the house was old and had some electrical problems. Nothing scary, just an old building needing a lot of work. When Lisa arrived at the house, the sun was just setting, and the sky was turning a dark shade of purple. The house looked huge, with tall windows covered in grime and ivy creeping up the walls. The wooden porch creaked under her feet as she stepped inside. The inside was cold and smelled like mildew and old wood. Dust covered every surface and cobwebs hung in the corners like silent ghosts. Lisa turned on her flashlight and started cleaning. She worked her way through the living room, kitchen, and hallways, dusting and sweeping. But something felt off. The deeper she went, the heavier the air became. Lisa's skin prickled and she kept feeling like someone was watching her. She told herself it was just her imagination. Upstairs, she found 3 bedrooms. The first 2 rooms were empty except for some broken furniture. But the third room was different. The door was closed, and it looked like it hadn't been opened in a long time. When Lisa pushed it open, she saw the room was neat and clean. A single chair sat by the window, and on it was a small old doll, wearing a faded blue dress. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't like dolls. Something about them always made her uneasy, but she was there to work, so she set the doll aside and continued cleaning. As she dusted the windowsill, the room suddenly grew colder. Lisa's breath became visible in the air. The doll seemed to be staring right at her. Then she heard it, a soft, almost whispering voice. It called her name. Lisa froze. "Who's there?" she asked, her voice shaking. No answer. She turned to leave the room, but the door slammed shut behind her. She rushed to the door and tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Panic started to rise in her chest. She banged on the door, shouting for help, but the house was silent. Then, the doll's eyes suddenly opened. Lisa stared in horror as the tiny glass eyes began to move, looking directly at her. The whispering grew louder, more urgent. "Help me! Help me!" Lisa backed away toward the corner, trembling. Suddenly, the doll rose from the chair, standing on its tiny legs. It began to crawl toward her, slow and steady. Lisa's heart pounded. She looked around desperately for something to defend herself with. She grabbed a nearby lamp and held it out. The doll stopped crawling and then jumped up toward her. Lisa swung the lamp, smashing it on the doll. It shattered into pieces, but the whispering didn't stop. Lisa screamed and covered her ears. The room seemed to spin, and she fell to her knees. When she looked up, the doll was gone, and the door was open. Lisa ran out of the room and down the stairs as fast as she could. She didn't stop until she was outside, gasping for breath in the cold night air. Later, she told Mr. Parker what had happened. He didn't seem surprised. "That doll belonged to the last owner's daughter," he said quietly. "She died in that house many years ago. Some say her spirit never left. Lisa never went back to that house, and she warns anyone who cleans old places. Sometimes what's left behind isn't just dust and dirt, it's memories, and some memories want to stay hidden. So if you ever hear a whisper in a quiet old house, listen carefully, but be ready to run."